Lucretia Renee Black was just 33 years old when her life was suddenly and violently cut short. In the early hours of November 18, 2024, a quiet morning in Springfield Township, Ohio, was shattered by gunfire. Moments later, Lucretia lay motionless outside her own front door, her home transformed into a crime scene. The woman responsible had already vanished, fleeing in a dark-colored Chevrolet Cruze, leaving behind only chaos and unanswered questions. Authorities were quick to act, launching a manhunt that would stretch across state lines. But what they didn't know then was that this case would not end in an arrest, nor would it see a trial. By the time the sun had fully risen that day, another life would be lost. This is the story of a woman loved by many, a relationship filled with turbulence, and a tragic series of events that left an entire community grieving. But it's more than that. It's a harsh reminder of the silent struggles many endure behind closed doors, struggles that, all too often, end in heartbreak. Who was Lucretia Renee Black? What led to the fatal confrontation on that November morning? And how did a marriage that once held promise end in such devastation? Today, we examine the lives of two women bound by love, torn apart by conflict, and ultimately, lost to an unforgiving reality. This isn't just a story about what happened. It's a story about why it happened. And it's one that must be told. Lucretia Renee Black was born on August 31, 1991, in Cincinnati, Ohio. From the very beginning, those who knew her best would say she carried a light within her, one that drew people in, made them feel safe, and left a lasting impression. She grew up in a city known for its rich history and strong sense of community. And for Lucretia, family was everything. As a child, she was full of life, curious, ambitious, and always eager to help others. She had a warmth about her, the kind that made people gravitate toward her. Friends recall her as the type of person who could walk into a room and instantly make it brighter. She was the listening ear when someone needed to vent, the reassuring presence in difficult times, and the dependable friend who always followed through on her word. Her determination carried her through school, where she excelled in her studies while balancing her natural talent for connecting with people. She had dreams, big ones, and she wasn't afraid of hard work. Whether it was in her personal life or her career, she had a drive that was undeniable. Those who were close to her remember how passionate she was about building a future for herself, one where she could be stable, successful, and most importantly, happy. Her work ethic was something that set her apart. She built a reputation for being hardworking, reliable, and deeply committed to whatever she set her mind to. But beyond her professional ambitions, she had a heart for people. She believed in lifting others up, in supporting those who needed help, and in making an impact, no matter how small. Her involvement in the community was a reflection of that. Whether it was volunteering, offering words of encouragement to those who needed it, or simply being there for her friends and family, she embodied kindness. But even with all the love and warmth she shared with the world, there were battles she fought privately, ones not everyone saw. She had endured hardships, faced setbacks, and, like many, longed for love that felt safe and steady. And when she met Taria Denise Brown, she believed she had found exactly that. At first, their relationship was filled with hope, two people brought together by love, with promises of a future. But love, as many know, isn't always enough. And for Lucretia, the journey that started with the promise of forever would take a turn she never could have anticipated. Taria Denise Brown was born in 1982, a woman who, on the surface, seemed to live a life much like anyone else. She had a past filled with experiences that shaped her, struggles that tested her, and decisions that would ultimately define the course of her life. Unlike Lucretia, Taria's journey was more complicated, layered with moments of ambition and times of deep frustration. Those who knew her described her as someone who could be charismatic when she wanted to be, outspoken, strong-willed, and, at times, unpredictable. She carried an intensity about her, one that could make her presence known in any room she entered. But there was something else, something beneath the surface. Taria's career path was one that never quite found stable footing. She had held jobs in different industries, searching for something that fit, something that gave her a sense of purpose. But stability was something that always seemed to slip through her fingers. While she was capable and intelligent, she struggled with consistency. There were moments of promise, times when it seemed like she was on the right track, but they never lasted long. Beyond her work life, her personal interests were varied. She had a passion for certain hobbies, things that gave her an outlet when life felt overwhelming. She had dreams too, though many of them were unspoken, buried beneath the weight of everything else she was dealing with. But there was another side to Taria, one that wasn't as easily visible to those on the outside. Those closest to her saw it, the short temper, the impulsive reactions, the way small disagreements could escalate into something much more intense. There had been arguments, moments when emotions ran high, times when the people around her saw a glimpse of something unsettling. It wasn't just anger. It was control, the need to have things a certain way, the inability to let go when she felt slighted. And when it came to relationships, those tendencies became even more pronounced. Lucretia and Taria's love story was complicated from the beginning. There were good days, moments of laughter, of connection, of shared dreams. But there were also bad days, ones filled with tension, misunderstandings, and fights that never truly found resolution. Their relationship was a cycle, one where love and conflict existed side by side, never fully tipping in one direction. And yet, despite the warning signs, despite the moments that hinted at something darker, Lucretia stayed. Maybe she believed things would get better. Maybe she hoped the love they had would be enough to weather the storms. But love can't fix everything. And as time went on, the cracks in their relationship only grew deeper. Until one day, everything shattered. Lucretia Renee Black and Taria Denise Brown's paths crossed in a way that felt almost destined. At first, there was an undeniable connection. One of those rare, electric moments where two people are drawn to each other as if fate itself had intervened. They started talking. And in the beginning, everything felt easy. Conversations flowed. Laughter came naturally. And the outside world seemed to fade when they were together. For Lucretia, Taria brought something new, something different. She was confident, assertive, the kind of person who knew how to command attention. There was an intensity to her that, at first, felt exciting. And for Taria, Lucretia was a steady force, someone warm and understanding, someone who believed in second chances. As their relationship deepened, they fell into a rhythm, one filled with late-night conversations, shared dreams, and promises of a future together. They spoke about what they wanted in life, what they hoped to build, and how their love would be enough to withstand anything that came their way. But love alone wasn't enough. Those close to them saw the signs early on. The good times were good, filled with passion, laughter, and affection. But when things went wrong, they went very wrong. Arguments would spark over the smallest things, and what should have been simple disagreements would quickly spiral into explosive fights. The people around them saw it for what it was, an on and off cycle that neither of them could seem to break. One day, they were inseparable. Next, they were barely speaking. Yet, despite the warning signs, despite the emotional turbulence, they kept coming back to each other. And then, in December 2023, they made a decision that would change everything. They got married. It was supposed to be the start of something new, a fresh chapter where they could finally leave behind the past struggles and build a life together. A new beginning. That's what they told themselves. That's what they told others. But those who knew them best weren't convinced. Friends and family watched as the same patterns continued, as the same arguments resurfaced. The tension never fully disappeared. It only lingered beneath the surface, waiting for the next moment to rise again. The love was still there, but so was the conflict. And as time went on, it became clear that their marriage wasn't healing the wounds of the past. If anything, it was deepening them. The fights grew more frequent. The distance between them widened. And while no one could have predicted just how tragic their story would become, many had feared, in the back of their minds, that this relationship would not have a happy ending. What no one knew then was that the countdown had already begun. November 18, 2024, started like any other morning. The air was crisp, the streets of Springfield Township slowly coming to life as people prepared for the day ahead. But inside the home on Lincoln Avenue, something was different. Tensions had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks, maybe even months. And on this morning, everything would come to a breaking point. No one knows exactly what was said in those final moments between Lucretia Renee Black and Taria Denise Brown. What started as words likely escalated into something more. A confrontation. A fight that could no longer be ignored. And then gunfire. At around 7 a.m., neighbors jolted awake to the unmistakable sound of shots ringing through the quiet neighborhood. Panic spread as people rushed to their windows, some stepping onto their porches, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding just beyond their doorsteps. Lucretia lay just outside her front door, her body still, blood pooling around her. The woman who had once been full of life, who had spent years lifting others up, who had dreamed of happiness, of a future, was now motionless. The reality of what had just happened set in quickly, but there was no time to process it. The 911 calls came in almost immediately. Frantic voices on the other end of the line described what they had just witnessed. A shooting. A woman down. The suspect gone. Officers from the Springfield Township Police Department responded within minutes, their sirens piercing through the morning air. When they arrived, they found exactly what had been reported. Lucretia Renee Black, lying at her doorstep, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. There was nothing they could do. She was already gone. The suspect, 42-year-old Taria Denise Brown, had vanished. Witnesses saw her flee the scene in a dark-colored Chevrolet Cruze, the vehicle speeding away before the authorities could arrive. She was out there somewhere armed, dangerous, and on the run. Law enforcement wasted no time. Details of the suspect and her vehicle were immediately broadcasted to surrounding jurisdictions. Officers knew that with each passing minute, she was getting farther away. But they also knew one thing: she couldn't run forever. As the news of Lucretia's death began to spread, grief quickly turned to disbelief. How had it come to this? Those who knew the couple had seen the turbulence in their relationship, the highs and lows, the arguments that never seemed to fully resolve. But no one had expected it to end like this. And as police across state lines began their search, the question lingered. Where was Taria Denise Brown? And what would she do next? By the time the first reports of Lucretia's murder hit police radios, Taria Denise Brown was already miles away. She was a fugitive now, a woman with nothing left to lose, speeding northbound on Interstate 65 in a dark-colored Chevrolet Cruze. Law enforcement agencies across multiple states had been alerted, and officers were watching, waiting for her next move. At around 9:30 a.m., nearly 2.5 hours after the shooting, Indiana State Police spotted the vehicle. There she was, moving through Clinton County, trying to outrun the inevitable. Troopers initiated a traffic stop, flashing their lights, signaling for her to pull over. But Taria had no intention of surrendering. Instead, she pressed her foot down on the accelerator. The chase was on. The pursuit stretched down the highway, the dark sedan weaving between cars, pushing forward as officers stayed close behind. The miles ticked by. Every moment she remained on the road, the danger grew, not just for her, but for everyone around her. There was no way this would end peacefully. Then she made her decision. She veered off the interstate, taking an exit that led her onto a county road near State Route 28. The chase slowed as she came to a stop. Silence settled over the area, but the tension was suffocating. Officers took position, weapons drawn, issuing commands. But before anyone could take another step, a single gunshot rang out from inside the vehicle. For a brief moment, there was stillness. Then a response. Officers fired, uncertain of what had just happened inside the car. When they finally approached, the reality of the situation became clear. Taria Denise Brown was slumped in the driver's seat. The woman who had been on the run, the woman who had just ended the life of someone she once vowed to love, was now dead. A firearm was found inside the vehicle. The same one officers believed that had been used to kill Lucretia earlier that morning. It was over. The pursuit had come to an end, but there was no victory in it. 2 lives were gone, 2 families shattered, and a community was left reeling, trying to make sense of the irreversible damage that had unfolded in just a matter of hours. But even as the crime scene was processed, as reports were filed, as the headlines started spreading across the country, one question still lingered in the air, one that no amount of police work or investigation could truly answer. How did it come to this? News of the tragedy spread quickly, and the weight of it settled heavily over Cincinnati. Lucretia Renee Black was gone. Taria Denise Brown was gone. 2 lives lost in a matter of hours, leaving behind an avalanche of grief and unanswered questions. On the evening of November 19, 2024, just one day after Lucretia's murder, the community gathered in her honor. Friends, family, and even strangers who had been touched by her story came together, holding balloons of blue and white, the colors that represented the light she had brought into their lives. The sun dipped below the horizon as they stood in silence, whispering their final messages before releasing the balloons into the sky. Some held onto their grief quietly, while others wept openly. The moment was both heartbreaking and beautiful, a collective goodbye, a tribute to a life that had been stolen too soon. But grief didn't end with the balloon release. On November 30th, the House of Joy in Cincinnati opened its doors for Lucretia's visitation and funeral service. The church was packed, filled with those who had known her, those who had loved her, and those who simply couldn't believe she was really gone. People spoke of her kindness, her determination, her dreams that would never be realized. Some remembered her laugh, others her unwavering loyalty. Every word spoken was a reminder of the void she left behind. Community leaders took notice. Domestic violence organizations issued statements, urging people to recognize the signs, to take action before it was too late. Advocates called for more resources, for better support systems, for conversations that too often get ignored. This wasn't just a story about 2 women in a troubled marriage. It was a story about a cycle of violence that had once again ended in tragedy. For those closest to Lucretia, no words could undo what had happened. No speeches or tributes could bring her back. But in their grief, in their pain, they clung to one thing, the hope that her story wouldn't be forgotten, that her name wouldn't fade into another statistic, that maybe, just maybe, someone else's life could be saved before it was too late. The tragic story of Lucretia Renee Black and Taria Denise Brown is not an isolated incident. It is a reflection of a pervasive issue that affects countless individuals and communities across the nation. Domestic violence, often shrouded in silence and stigma, remains a critical public health concern in the United States. According to the National Violence Against Women Survey, approximately 25% of women and 7.6% of men reported experiencing intimate partner violence at some point in their lives. These numbers, however, may not fully capture the extent of the problem, as domestic violence is among the most underreported crimes worldwide. Factors such as financial dependence, fear of retaliation, and societal norms contribute to victims' reluctance to come forward. The consequences of domestic violence extend beyond the immediate physical harm inflicted. Victims often endure long-term psychological trauma, including anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Families are torn apart, and children who witness such violence are at a higher risk of developing emotional and behavioral issues. Communities bear the economic burden through increased healthcare costs, legal expenses, and lost productivity. Recent studies have highlighted the alarming rate at which domestic violence cases go unreported. For instance, a 2014 study across the European Union found that only 14% of women reported their most serious incident of intimate partner violence to the police. Similarly, in the United States, studies have found that men are much less likely to report victimization in these situations. This underreporting underscores the need for more robust support systems and public awareness campaigns to encourage victims to seek help. Addressing domestic violence requires a multifaceted approach. It involves not only strengthening legal frameworks and law enforcement responses, but also fostering a cultural shift that challenges the normalization of violence in relationships. Education plays a pivotal role in this transformation, as does the availability of resources such as shelters, counseling services, and hotlines for those affected. The story of Lucretia and Teria serves as a poignant reminder of the devastating impact domestic violence can have. It calls upon us to reflect on the measures in place to protect individuals and to advocate for a society where everyone can feel safe in their own homes. By acknowledging the prevalence and severity of domestic violence, we take the first step toward meaningful change and the prevention of future tragedies. Lucretia Renee Black's story is a devastating reminder that domestic violence can escalate to fatal consequences. But it doesn't have to. Every voice, every action, every effort to raise awareness can make a difference. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, help is available. National hotlines, local shelters, and counseling services exist to provide support, guidance, and protection. No one should have to face this alone. Communities play a crucial role in prevention. Getting involved in local advocacy programs, supporting shelters, or simply being a safe space for someone in need can change lives. Education and open conversations about unhealthy relationships are the first steps toward breaking the cycle of abuse. Lucretia's story cannot be rewritten, but future tragedies can be prevented. It starts with awareness. It starts with action. And it starts with us. Lucretia Renee Black's tragic story is one of love, conflict, and an ending that should have never happened. We've explored her life, her relationship with Teria Denise Brown, and the devastating events of November 18, 2024. We've also looked at the broader issue of domestic violence and the urgent need for awareness and action. Now, it's your turn to share your thoughts. Have you or someone you know been impacted by domestic violence? What do you think needs to change to prevent tragedies like this? Let's continue the conversation in the comments. If you found this video insightful, consider subscribing for more content on critical social issues. Share this video to help raise awareness, because these conversations could save lives.